Hey there, friends. Welcome to today's deep dive into one of the most fascinating figures in Christian mysticism, Teresa of Avila. In this video, we're not just sharing a biography, but exploring intricate, data-driven insights about her life, her spiritual innovations, and her profound impact on monastic reforms. Whether you're a scholar, a theologian, or someone who simply loves historical deep dives, you're in for a treat. We'll be unpacking the nuances behind her early life, the inner workings of her mystical experiences, and the technicalities of her writings that continue to influence modern theological research. Expect to encounter advanced topics, ranging from her visionary transverberation to the statistical reverberations of her reforms on the Carmelite order. We'll also highlight her contributions using number and fact-based analysis. Grab your notepads and settle in as we take a friendly yet technical journey into the life of Saint Teresa, whose legacy stretches far beyond her time. Let's get started as we lay a solid foundation for understanding her extraordinary fusion of mysticism, reform, and enduring scholarly relevance. Early life and background. All right, let's go back to the early years of Teresa Sánchez de Cepeda Dávila y Ahumada, born on March 28, 1515, in either Ávila or Gótarandúra. Although details about her exact birthplace spark debate among historians, what we know is that she emerged from a complex socio-cultural tapestry in 16th century Spain. Born into a well-to-do family, her father being a prosperous wool merchant and her paternal lineage marked by the tumult of converso histories, Teresa's upbringing was informed by both affluence and the bittersweet legacy of religious persecution. Her early exposure to stories of valor and sanctity, notably through her devout mother, who once risked everything for the sake of Christ, laid the groundwork for Teresa's lifelong spiritual quest. Experts analyzing archival data reveal fascinating trends, socioeconomic pressures, and a fervor for reform in a society grappling with Catholic orthodoxy versus emerging Protestant ideas played crucial roles. Teresa's formative years were steeped in the rich interplay of tradition and innovation, providing her with the ideal context to later challenge the status quo. Her education at an Augustinian nuns' school and the early influence of various devotional narratives not only shaped her piety, but also prepped her for a nuanced understanding of mystical theology. For those well-versed in historical demography and archival studies, the lineage and familial trials, like her paternal grandfather's brushes with the Inquisition, offer a wealth of analytical data to ponder. It's this blend of personal heritage and broader historical shifts that makes Teresa's background remarkably intriguing and sets the stage for her revolutionary spiritual journey. Religious life and calling. Now let's dive into Teresa's decision to embrace religious life, a turning point that would define her legacy. At the age of 20, despite family tensions born from divergent visions of piety, Teresa joined the Carmelite convent of the Incarnation. Initially, she wasn't sure about the leap into a structured monastic existence, but a blend of inner conviction and gentle persuasion from her circle eventually led her to commit fully to a life of prayer, contemplation, and reforms. Once within the convent walls, Teresa immersed herself in the study of contemplative practices. Her early religious experiences were marked by an intricate interplay between intense physical austerities and profound inner visions, a juxtaposition that has intrigued experts since. Advanced studies show that her bouts of illness and near-death experiences, followed by miraculous recoveries, weren't random occurrences, but were interpreted by Teresa as signs of divine favor. This period is meticulously documented in her autobiographical writings, where she methodically outlines her progression through various states of mystical consciousness. During this phase, she honed her practice of oratio recollectionis, an internal form of prayer that allowed her to initiate what many later described as a spiritual metamorphosis. With her extensive readings of contemporary mystical texts such as Osuna's Abecedario Espiritual and the treatises by Peter of Alcantara, Teresa developed a technical understanding of ascetical disciplines. This wasn't just about ritualistic observance, it was about systematically dissecting every nuance of divine encounter and inner silence. For the expert observer, the methodological progression in her spirituality, from the initial fervor of vocal prayer to the later depths of ecstasy and union with God, provides a goldmine of data. Teresa laid down the first technical outlines of what could be seen as an inner science of prayer. Her journey into the compounded layers of mystical experience makes for a compelling subject for both historical and technical analysis, blending the empirical with the exalted in a way few before her had achieved. Mystical experiences and writings. All right, now let's talk about that mind-blowing part. Teresa's mystical experiences and her groundbreaking writings. For those of you who crave data-driven deep dives, Teresa's life provides ample technical details worth analyzing. Around the mid-1550s, Teresa began to experience what she described as religious ecstasies, which, through her detailed descriptions, are now subject to modern neurological and psychiatric investigations. Some studies even speculate that she might have had symptoms akin to temporal lobe epilepsy, a hypothesis corroborated by neurological analysis of her symptomatology as recorded in her extensive diary entries. One of the most famous mystical episodes is the transverberation, where Teresa described a seraph-like figure piercing her heart with a golden lance. This intense experience, replete with both exquisite agony and sublime heavenly pleasure, serves as a key turning point in her spiritual career. Experts have studied the rhythmic patterns and recurring motifs in her handwriting during these episodes, drawing parallels with other documented neurological symptoms in mystical states. While her description is poetic, the clinical details provide us with raw, unfiltered data for analysis, making her accounts a rare historical record of mystical physiology. Now let's shift gears and examine her writings that have become seminal works in mysticism. Her autobiography, The Life of Teresa of Jesus, reads like a diagnostic manual, detailing every stage of her spiritual evolution with scientific-like precision. Teresa dissects her inner experiences by categorizing them into distinct phases, from mental prayer and meditation to the ultimate states of ecstatic consciousness. In The Way of Perfection, she presents a well-structured guide for contemplative prayer that feels almost like a how-to manual for spiritual engineers. It offers precise instructions on achieving various states of union with the divine, a topic that resonates with modern explorations in neurotheology. Then there's The Interior Castle, perhaps her most celebrated work, which metaphorically describes the soul as a castle with 7 mansions. Each mansion represents an advanced stage in the journey towards divine union, and Teresa's layered approach offers a systematic classification akin to modern models of psychological development. For scholars, the structure of these mansions provides a fascinating framework for understanding mystical ascent, where each stage is accompanied by distinct physiological and cognitive markers. It's as if she was outlining a multidimensional map of the human psyche, long before psychology became a formal discipline. Her writings are full of technical insights and detailed contemplations on phenomena like the prayer of quiet and the affective prayer. Every observation is backed by a rigorous introspective methodology, making her a pioneer in establishing an empirical tradition in spiritual experience. For experts in both theology and neuropsychology, Teresa's work is invaluable, not only as a spiritual guide, but also as an early case study in the intersections of mysticism, cognitive science, and emotional regulation. So whether you're here for the artful metaphors or the clinical details, there's no denying that Teresa's work offers an intoxicating blend of poetic mysticism and rigorous self-experimentation. It's one of those rare moments where the subjective and the empirical overlap, inviting us to explore the inner workings of the soul with the precision of a scientist and the passion of a poet. Reforms and contributions to the Church. Let's move on to the era when Teresa's inner visions transformed into outward reforms. By the 1560s, Teresa had become increasingly disturbed by the declining rigor of monastic life. The convent's lax adherence to cloister and spiritual discipline was at odds with the deep contemplative practices she knew were critical for union with God. This observation sparked a wave of reform in which Teresa not only reimagined the spiritual landscape, but implemented technical guidelines and strict regulations that resonated on both a doctrinal and operational level. Her reforms were nothing short of revolutionary. First, she established new convents where discipline was enforced with surgical precision. Historical records and quantitative analyses from the period highlight how, within just a few years, Teresa founded over 17 reformed convents and numerous men's monasteries. Each foundation was carefully planned, from the layout of the prayer spaces to the strict financial records that espoused a life of absolute poverty and detachment from worldly ownership. This wasn't just reform, it was a complete restructuring of the monastic system that challenged centuries of tradition. Working closely with the likes of St. John of the Cross, whose own mystical insights echoed Teresa's, the Reform movement took on a progressive yet methodical approach. Together, they created the framework for what is now known as the Discalced Carmelites, reaffirming core spiritual principles through well-documented protocols. If you're into numbers, you'll appreciate that by 1579, after initial setbacks and even inquisitorial scrutiny, Teresa's reform movement had re-established its institutions under royal and papal support. Such endorsements weren't merely symbolic. They involved detailed legal and financial audits and the appointment of provincial superiors tasked with monitoring the new systems. Moreover, her reforms had profound statistical impacts on the Church's operations. Researchers today have quantified improvements in discipline, prayer regularity, and community morale within these reformed orders. Detailed reports from the period even indicate a measurable decrease in instances of laxity compared to unreformed groups. This process of institutional change, driven both by theological fervor and rigorous operational discipline, paved the way for a renewed monastic standard that would influence similar movements across Europe. Teresa's technical acumen in documenting her own reforms, especially in her Libro de las Fundaciones, lessens any ambiguity about her leadership and vision. It's a prime example of how deep analytical insight combined with unwavering spiritual commitment can transform an institutional system. For historians and experts in church administration, her legacy is a testament to the power of detailed reform, where passion meets practicality and vision is backed by measurable change. In an era where numerical data and statistical evidence are revered, Teresa's Reformation efforts stand as a pioneering model intersecting mysticism with methodical governance. Legacy and canonization. Now let's talk legacy and canonization, the final, yet enduring chapters of Teresa's story. After her death in 1582, the momentum of her pioneering reforms and expansive writings only grew. In 1622, just 40 years later, Pope Gregory XV canonized her, a recognition that was both swift and symbolically potent in affirming the reformative ripples she'd set off in the Church. For experts tracking historical transformations, her canonization represents a remarkable case where intangible mystical experiences were validated through the tangible processes of church politics and institutional reform. It's also fascinating to note that Teresa was later recognized as a Doctor of the Church by Pope Paul VI in 1970, making her one of the first women to receive such an honor. Data records from the Vatican archives document the extensive study and deliberation undertaken before conferring this title, underscoring her extraordinary intellectual and spiritual contributions. Her writings continue to fuel research in both theological and modern psychological studies, and her frameworks, especially those outlined in the Interior Castle, remain a benchmark in the study of mysticism. The sustained veneration of Teresa can be traced through relic distribution, detailed records of exhumations, and the careful preservation of her remains and artifacts. These physical and documentary legacies allow modern researchers to track the evolution of religious thought over centuries. Importantly, Teresa's life and posthumous honors illustrate how revolutionary ideas can catalyze institutional change, influencing not only religious practices, but also the administrative and structural paradigms of the Church. Her impact is measurable, from the proliferation of disciplined prayer routines to quantitative studies that compare the spiritual productivity of reformed versus unreformed monastic communities. Even today, scholars continue to mine her works for insights into the interplay between mysticism and empiricism. Teresa's legacy is a testament to the enduring power of reform driven by deep introspection, rigorous documentation, and an unyielding commitment to spiritual excellence, cultural impact, and conclusion. All right, as we wrap this up, let's look at Teresa's cultural impact and recap our journey together. It's pretty amazing to see how one person's mystical vision and technical reform have left an indelible mark on both art and scholarship. From Bernini's iconic sculpture, The Ecstasy of Saint Teresa, which vividly captures the emotional intensity of her transverberation, to modern literary and musical tributes, Teresa's influence transcends traditional religious boundaries. Her writings not only contribute to advanced theological studies, but also inspire analytical debates in neurotheology and psychological research. People on all sides of the academic spectrum admire her for blending plain-spoken personal experience with intricate, methodologically sound observations, a rarity in any era. Whether you're delving into the layered mansions of her interior castle or analyzing detailed reforms documented in her foundational texts, Teresa's legacy stands as a bridge between empirical investigation and mystical exploration. So thanks for hanging out with me on this enlightening journey into the life of Saint Teresa. I hope you've enjoyed this blend of deep technical insights and friendly conversation. If you're as fascinated by her complex inner life and groundbreaking reforms as I am, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more content like this, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, keep exploring the fascinating intersections between faith, history, and data-driven insights. Cheers.